Welcome to the second tutorial. In this tutorial what we're going to be doing is cutting out the CO2 dragster. I'd like to have a quick chat to you about the difference between the manual indexer and the automated indexer. I've got the manual indexer here. The manual indexer, what I'm required to do is at regular stages of creating a cut, depending on how many sides I'm going to be cut, I'll need to rotate this head. And you won't need to do that when you're working with the automated indexer. It will do that, funny enough, automatically. First step is I've taken my blank here and I've put in the CO2 dragster jig in the back, and I'm just placing that into this tailstock just here. The other thing that I'm using as well is, you can see one of these, it's a jig, it's a CO2 dragster jig, and what I've done with this jig, it normally had another little jaw here up the front, and I've removed that altogether. When I was working with the managing director of Boxit itself, we decided that this jig was probably best off if we take that part off and we just ground it off, and it works much better. And we're just going to be positioning that in. There's a little allocation hole in there. You can actually see that it's got a little locator, and that just fits in onto the pin at the back, which you can see there. And then we're just going to be pushing up our CO2 dragster blank into those jaws. Okay, bit of an effort, and there we go, it's in position. Just taking the key, and we're going to be tightening that up. Make sure that it's nice and tight up against that jig. That's very, very important. And we're not going to be tightening up too tight, it's balsa, but tight enough to take purchase. Like so. Last thing I need to do is just take the Allen key, and we're just going to be tightening up this back bolt. Don't do it too tight, just reasonable tights. Too tight's broken. An old machinist told me once. Okay, so that's the end of that. Let's go back to the software and get going. Before we do though, one thing that I'd like to do is I'm going to be rotating this to the number 1 position. So I just rotate it to the number 1 position. With the manual indexer, I just need to tighten this up, and it holds it perfectly into place. You will not need to do that with the automated indexer. It will do it, funny enough, automatically. Okay, let's go on to the software. Okay, so here we are on the software, and it's telling me that the guard is open. So let's go back over here and close the guard. And I'm just going to be twisting those up, like so. Now it's going to ask me to auto home. Just waiting for that to show you what it's actually saying. It's auto home. So I just select on that, and now the machine, going back in, will auto home into position. If it's already homed, it may not actually ask you for that step. Okay, so there we are. All right. Okay, the next step in the wizard is it's going to ask us what sort of jig that we're going to be using. Now, if I select down here, go down, I'm using the manual 4th position index 2-jaw. If you have the auto 2-jaw, then you go the auto 4th axis 2-jaw. So, but I've got the plebs version, which is the manual 4th position index 2-jaw, so I'm going to be selecting that and then just go OK. So the next thing it says is to rotate it into position 1. I've done that before, so it's in position 1. If it's automated, it won't ask you this step, it'll just automatically rotate into that position once you start to cut. Then we go OK. Okay, the next thing it's asking us is what is the length of the material that we're cutting. And what we need to do is we need to measure it between jaws. Now, we're not using a jaw at the back, we're only using a jaw at the front. So what we're going to be doing in this case is we're going to measure from the front jaw right back to the complete end of the material. So let's come across and do that now. Okay, there we go. I've put my rule on the material, and I'm measuring it from the very front of that jaw right towards the back. Now, another thing is, don't push the dragster jig all the way in, because what you'll find that it does sometimes is it machines off a bit. You can see I've done that. I've machined off a bit of my bolt, and this is my second router bit that I'm actually using. So leave a reasonable gap. I've got about 7mm there, but something around that would be good. The dragster jig will still hold quite well even if you do it at that. So I'm going to say this is 300, or probably around 302. Okay, you can see I've typed it in there, 300, and then I'm just going to go OK. All right, this is the next step, against peg, because over here you can see the diagram, it's got a little peg. If you remember, we put that Dragster, CO2 Dragster jig right up against that peg. And it's really a measurement of the distance between the material that we're cutting and that peg. But we've got a jig in there, and I know the exact size of that jig, and it's not against the peg, it's offset. See, this is offset here. Then what we're going to be doing is going OK, and then we're going to be putting in the size of this, the distance away, and it's 6.7. I've measured it very accurately, and for you, if you're using that, use 6.7, and then we just go OK. It says the guard's open, so I'm going to shut that. So now it's telling me OK, let's do that. So I just go OK, ready to manufacture, OK, I press that. All right. First thing that we're going to be doing is coming across here and says, OK, start cycle button. So we're going to select the cycle button. And if I go back to the machine, you'll now see that it's coming out to a tool change park position. And that means that the router's moved right up to the front so I can change the tool. Now I've got the tool in there because I've used it before, and I've taken the 6.35 router bit and I've pushed it right up into the collet, and I've tightened it up and it's ready to go. But if you haven't done that and you've got on another bit, another router bit, then you can take it out at this stage. You can open up the door and it will not stop, and then you can close the door back up and move to the next step. Okay, next step, it says, okay, we've fit the bit, so we go yes, let's start the cycle, and now it moves over into a park position. Now this is a very important park position. Park's on the front left-hand side of the billet that we're machining. And you can see at the moment I've left my rule on the inside of there, so I won't cut because that would destroy my bit, the rule, and probably the machine. And it also parks itself right on the end, I'll say that again, right on the end of that front left-hand corner, and also 30 mil above the surface. So it's an opportunity for you to look and go, okay, is that 30 mil above the surface of my material, right to the front and to the left-hand side? You come around the side, you check it again, and you can get an idea if it's ready to cut. And this is ready to cut. From there, I come back over to the Boxford software and I just select cut. Sorry about the plane flying over the head at the moment. So I press here to cut and start the process, start the cycle, and it will start cutting out this side. Now, in the automated indexer, it'll cut one side, it'll automatically flip the piece over to the other side and then cut the other side. It won't do that for the manual. It'll cut one side, and over on the Boxford software it'll say change to position 3, and you'll need to open up the door, undo the black screw, rotate it into position 3, go back to the machine and press OK, I'm ready to cut, and it cuts the other side. But that's how you do it. That's how you set up the Boxford mill to cut the CO2 Dragster. I hope this has been helpful.